Consumer Hour. This week we've got legal advice with barrister Daniel Barnett joining me to advise on your legal queries. And we'll get his take on the news of the moment surrounding Priti Patel. But I want to get your view, first of all, on this story. Supporters of Priti Patel today have been defending the Home Secretary over bullying accusations after the top civil servant, Sir Philip Rutnam, quit and vowed to sue the government for constructive dismissal. Now, what do you make of this? Is this a sign, as some are saying, of a dysfunctional government? Or is it a sign of a government that is determined to bring about change and upsetting some people along the way? 0345 6060 973. Text 84850 and tweet at LBC with your view on this. Labour's John McDonnell claimed today that Sir Philip's resignation reflected very badly on Prime Minister Boris Johnson's grip on his government. He said within a couple of months he's lost his Chancellor, and now it looks as though he's going to lose his Home Secretary as well. I think that says something about Boris Johnson's own abilities and management of his own government. But supporters of the government and of Priti Patel say it's a sign of determination to deliver change, that the civil service might get upset. We don't know, of course, what happened in the particular case, the issue between Priti Patel and Sir Philip. And I don't think we can really speculate about that. That is presumably going to come up in a tribunal if that happens. But let's talk about this in broader terms. The broader question, is this part of a deliberate pattern and one that's to be welcomed or not? 0345 6060 973 is the number. And first we're going to talk to Daw QC, lawyer and author of the upcoming book, Justice on Trial. Good evening, Chris.
Evening, Clive.
Thanks for joining us. So is this case as significant as is being made out?
It's massively significant. This is utterly unprecedented that the permanent secretary of one of the major departments of state has basically gone on record in public and called the Home Secretary a bully and a liar. And I've read his statement that he issued, and I'm sure you've run it a number of times on the radio today. That's what he said, that Priti Patel is a bully, and when it comes to briefing against her own permanent secretary, Sir Philip, he says he doesn't believe her when she says she wasn't involved. And I've never heard anything like it. There's never been anything like it. Margaret Thatcher, for example, fell out with the civil service famously on many occasions. Nothing like this ever happened. You never had a permanent secretary coming out on camera in public being offered presumably millions, and certainly there's no doubt he will have been offered a huge amount of money for this not to happen. He said himself he was offered a large settlement by the Cabinet Office to be effectively bribed to keep quiet. He's turned down the money and he's shown his principles and said, I'm not having it. I'm going on the record and I'm going to take this to a public tribunal so it can all come out in public. Utterly unprecedented. Nothing like this has ever happened before.
Do you think that this is illustrative of some kind of change of culture then, some real change that's going on?
I think it absolutely is. It indicates two separate things. Firstly, a change of culture, because we're going away from a culture where the government broadly accepts that the civil service is independent, that they have a job to do, and that you don't put pressure on them to do things that are possibly unlawful, that haven't got the stamp of legal approval. Bearing in mind, this is the same Prime Minister and the same government, of course, who was found to have broken the law by the Supreme Court when he prorogued Parliament and tried to stop Parliament sitting at all to vote on legislation about the most important issue of our day. Same Prime Minister, same principles. So we've had a huge change in a disregard for those basic principles. But also, I just think we're dealing with people here. In Priti Patel, remember what the history of the Home Secretary. She's someone who was on television and said, I support the death penalty. Unsurprisingly, there was an outrage because we've not had the death penalty in this country for over half a century, and it's completely against European human rights law. And she changed her mind and said, OK, well, I didn't really mean it. That's the sort of principles. Boris Johnson, who flicked a coin to decide whether he was in favour or against Brexit. and basically came out and decided that it was politically advantageous to be in favour of Brexit. And now we have a Brexit Prime Minister, and now we have a Brexit Home Secretary, because those are the views that have got them to power, and those are the views that have seen them through to where they are. Zero principles, or put it another way, principles for sale. That's how I would say it.
OK. Now, what I would say is, and again, looking at some of the messages coming in as well, there are some people who take a very different view of this and say that what we have learnt is that the civil service can actually be obstructive. And you've got an elected government with a big majority and a mandate to do something. And the civil service, for all we know, may not be being helpful at all, to put it politely.
But the civil service has to act in accordance with the law and give advice.
But we don't know whether they've been asked to break we don't know whether they've been asked to break the law. They may just disagree and say, no, I wouldn't recommend doing that, Minister.
Well, there's two different things. Firstly, there has been no suggestion that Sir Philip did anything improper as far as giving advice as the Permanent Secretary at the Home Department. Nobody suggested that he did that. There's been briefings in the background of a quite unprecedented, ambitious kind, as he himself has pointed out. But the reality of the civil service is this, that we should be proud of our civil service. We have the best civil service, just as we have the best judiciary. And they've been another target of this government time after time, and this Prime Minister. We have the best judiciary. It's independent. It's free of corruption. We have a civil service which is independent and free of corruption. We need to protect and preserve those institutions, and this Prime Minister and this Home Secretary are intent on doing nothing but attacking them. And it's a danger to our civil society. And all the members of the public out there, if you care about democracy, if you care about civil society, yes, you voted this government in. Yes, they've got a large majority, but they must pass legislation through Parliament and they must observe the law of the land, just like all of the rest of us have to do. And this government is intent on doing the opposite of that.
All right, Chris, hang on a minute. I want to just get a view from Ben Habib, who's joining us now, who's a businessman and former Brexit Party MEP. Hello, Ben.
Hi, good evening.
What do you make of this, then? Is Chris right, the government are trying to break the law?
I mean, I've never heard such rot, frankly. I wouldn't be forthright in the way that I'm about to be forthright typically. But the innuendo that there's been the suggestion that Priti Patel has asked Sir Philip to break the law is just absolutely absurd. What happened here is that Priti Patel, in accordance with manifesto pledges made at the last election, has tried to get an immigration policy through which the Permanent Secretary does not like. And
how do you know
this
that?
Is a man.
How do you know that?
We know that the civil service has been opposed to Brexit.
How do you know it? Where's your evidence?
Absolutely
What's your evidence?
Well,
what's your source?
I haven't been living under a rock for the last 3 years. We know that the political establishment
explain the source of the information that the civil service have obstructed the Home Secretary. What's the evidence?
Well, we know it. Ollie Robbins was against Brexit. No doubt this gentleman was against Brexit. And I can tell you that the fact that this gentleman, who's 54 years old, he's been around the block a few times, he's been in government a long time, he presided over the Windrush scandal, but didn't see fit to resign at that point, but resigns now because he's being bullied by Priti Patel.
The minister is responsible for the Windrush scandal. The minister's responsible, not the civil service. You don't blame the civil service for responsible for the catastrophe.
He was responsible for the executive action under Amber Rudd, but Amber Rudd took the fall. And actually, he should have been briefing Amber Rudd better than he briefed her.
They're supposed to have principles and resign when something under their watch goes wrong.
As far as I'm concerned, if he was doing his job, he would have gone quietly. He wouldn't have made the fuss he's making. He clearly wants to bring Priti Patel down. It's completely wrong. He should implement that immigration policy. All the press today was on about that, the immigration policy now may not make legislation by the end of the transition period. That's completely wrong. The British people voted to get a new immigration policy, and the civil service needs to implement it. And this chap shouldn't be resigning, blaming Priti for, abusive language or whatever, briefing against him. He should do what the Home Secretary wants, get the policy through.
You're a businessman. You employ people. Do you bully, swear at, and belittle your employees? Do you do that? If you do,
I do not bully.
You shouldn't be running a business, and she shouldn't be the Home Secretary.
But we don't know that any of that has happened. That's just what Philip is saying.
It's alleged, absolutely. It's alleged. And he wouldn't make it. And I can't wait for him to bring it to court. I hope he brings it to court because it will shine a bright light on the civil service, his own actions, and what's been going on for the last 3 years.
Let me ask you, Ben, is this, when we add this up with other things like Sajid Javid walking out as Chancellor, which equally was extraordinary, does this not suggest that this is a government that hasn't got a grip, that it is really dysfunctional, it's not running things successfully?
No, I don't think so. I think the Prime Minister is rightly taking all steps necessary to give effect to his manifesto pledges. That's what I read. He promised that he would be spending money coming into government. He promised that he would do that. He's levelling up the infrastructure around the country. Sajid Javid was clearly not on for that plan, and Sajid left, and Rishi Sunak is in place, and I think he's a terrific chancellor. He's a young man, he's untested, but I think he's terrific, and I think the Prime Minister is doing exactly the right thing.
But do you think the government has got it in for the civil service, though? They really want revenge for Brexit being held up.
It's not revenge. It's a necessary clear-out. You can't have the administrative body of government frustrating the will of the elected officials. And that's what's happened for the last 3.5 years.
OK, thank you very much. Very strong opinions from Chris Daw and Ben Habib there. What do you think of what's happened? Both of them seem to be saying, bring on the tribunal. Now, we can't talk specifically about what's happened between Priti Patel and her behaviour. We don't know what happened. And no doubt that will or won't come out in a tribunal at some point. But is there a wider issue here? Do you trust the civil service? Is the government being disrespectful? 0345 6060 973 for your opinion on this. Text 84850 and tweet at LBC. More in a moment. I'm Clive Bull, 7:15.
This is LBC.